Before I was making YouTube videos regularly, I updated my blog more frequently with written content. And I wrote an article or a blog post about TV surpassing film from my perspective. At the time, I think this was almost 3-4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago at this point. I saw that TV was quickly becoming the dominant form of media that I personally consumed, as well as what a lot of my friends and family members were talking about. And just the idea around TV had changed substantially. This is with stuff like Breaking Bad, and before that you had stuff like The Wire and Sopranos, and so many good TV shows, and not just good, but great. And I saw it back then, and it continues to prove itself out each and every year that TV, I think, has just passed movies and cinema and traditional filmmaking. And I think there's a couple reasons why that has happened. Obviously, getting access to media is a lot more easy now. You have stuff like Netflix and YouTube and Amazon and Hulu and all these different delivery platforms that you didn't have even just a few years back. You have stuff like On Demand and Redbox and all these different ways to consume things, and people want it faster and faster and faster. So when you're looking at movies and you're waiting for the next Avengers film, and you've got to wait 2 or 3 years to get the next dose of what it is that you're looking for, that can seem like a long period of time, where if you only have to wait 1 more year for an entire season of content, that's a lot faster, that's a lot more digestible, and you can switch shows and you can go through it a lot quicker, which I think is what people are hungry for. You also have the ability to tell better stories. I think you're able to tell better stories, or at least have the potential to tell better stories. A lot of TV is trash. So when I'm talking about TV, think of like the cream of the crop, the best of the best. Right now that would be stuff like House of Cards or Narcos, a lot of the Netflix shows. Recently there was Breaking Bad, which that ended, but that's like my favorite show of all time. You've got Game of Thrones. Almost all of the HBO stuff is fantastic. There's some stuff on Showtime that that was all right for a while. Dexter, when that was on. You have these really good shows that pretty much everyone can get in, and every once in a while there'll be like a nice network TV show like Lost was pretty popular when that was on, and I think there's some issues with Lost, but anyway, you're able to potentially tell better stories because you have more time, and you have more time to draw out the plot, to continue the plot from episode to episode. So what a movie would have to cover in 2 hours, you're able to cover in 13, or in some cases, if it's network TV, 24 different episodes. And you can spend more time with the characters, you can have more characters, you can have more things going on. And I think that just makes for more compelling stories. If you look at any kind of novel, a book that's written, let's say, and when you try and adapt that into a movie, Lord of the Rings, great example. Those books are whether you like the books or you don't like the books, those became enormous movies, huge movies that were so incredibly long, and even then it didn't cover everything that was in the book. And then you have books like The Hobbit that they split up into 3 movies, and I know there's some people who have issues with that, but when you compare that structure with something like a Game of Thrones, where you're able to spend an entire season or 2 on one book, I think it makes for a lot better content. One of my favorite book series of all time is Ender's Game, and Ender's Game is the first one in the series, and there's other ones, but Ender's Game, I think, makes a terrible movie. However, if it had been a TV show, I think it could have been a lot better, or at least had the potential to be, because almost every book, novel that tells a compelling story can't adequately be portrayed over 2 hours in a movie. So the kind of stories that people have liked over the thousands of years of writing and crafting stories and telling stories, we've kind of figured out what the right beats are for a plot point, and what kind of characters you need, and how many, and how deep they need to be. And from the writing perspective, we've got that nailed down. And then when you try and cram that all into a 2-hour movie, things fall short, characters feel flat, and it relies a lot more on the spectacle. And that was the main draw for cinema for a long time, was the spectacle, because the budgets were there. It was really expensive, it took a long time, but when you went and saw it, it was incredible. But now so much of that has come down in price. It's a lot easier. You can turn it around faster just because technology has gotten a lot better, that we're able to do things on TV now that you couldn't do before. So stuff like The Walking Dead, where they're doing all this, this cosmetics and prosthetics and telling these great compelling stories over long periods of time, and it's so engaging, it's so captivating, and people love it. I gotta say, most people I know and that I talk to on social media get far more invested in television content than they do in theatrical releases. Sure, people go and see the next Marvel movie, but the connection and the bond that people make with characters and with stories, I think, tends to be far greater on TV. And that's just because, the nature, it's become a lot easier to tell these stories in a cost-effective, quick manner. Movies have always cost a lot of money and taken a long time to produce, where TV now is able to use better and better technology, do things faster and faster at more affordable cost, and that allows for those better stories to open up and flourish in that environment. And I think, potentially the same thing could be said of, the online space, not currently, but maybe one day, perhaps stuff like YouTube could theoretically become the new TV. But I think right now TV is in a really sweet spot where the amount of content that's being produced per season, per run of a show, is the right amount that people want. Then they get their fill of it and they wait a year and they get the next kind of dose. And if there's a few shows that are kind of going maybe getting outside of that scope and it's a little difficult to produce. Mad Men, for example, they end up splitting up their final season. Game of Thrones, I know, has had some struggles maintaining the pace that they're going because they're fighting, catching up with the books, but then also being able to produce at a quality that they want. So there are some challenges, of course, and obviously there are some great movies that tell really compelling stories, and you only need 2 hours to tell the story that's being told. However, when you look at it from a historical perspective and what TV used to be, where it was the serialized content, where every week it was kind of the same story and just different characters, different package, over and over and over, the same beats over and over and over again, because people didn't binge watch. They didn't have a way to go back and catch up and watch it in the proper order. So you have these kind of one-off things. There's no longevity to that. There's nothing to resonate. Maybe you like the characters and you're into the sitcom. Like Friends was incredibly popular, Seinfeld, incredibly popular. But looking at that now, if you go back and watch one of them, maybe for nostalgic reasons you enjoy it, but there's not really any kind of through plot really. And even the shows that were doing that, 10, 20 years ago, the quality was just not there. It was, it looked like television, looked like TV. Now I see TV shows that look better than some movies. So it's just become, I think for me, my preferred format of watching stories. And I'll say it again because I feel like I always have, anytime I make a statement like this, there's gonna be someone in the comments, well, what about this TV show? It's terrible. Or what about this movie? It's amazing. Obviously there are exceptions, but I think in general, when you look at it, you have companies like Disney and Marvel trying to make what I would, call almost like trying to make the TV show format fit for their movies, where they're coming out with 3 or 4 different movies all in the same cinematic universe every single year in order to maintain this momentum and this trajectory of just the train that's never ending and just keep the cash flow coming. And they have to do it very, they're paying actors quite a bit of money. The special effects are very expensive, and the production itself is enormously expensive. And yet they have to cram so much into that hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, that it can feel kind of watered down, kind of rushed. I don't know if you feel this way about superhero movies. I love superhero movies. I think they're incredibly entertaining. The spectacle is great. The characters are usually, pretty fun to watch. Aside from some of the DC movies, those are usually not as fun. They're kind of gloomy. But it still feels hollow. It's shallow, right? It's that top level where TV is able to take it a little bit deeper and go into the characters, what's motivating them. You can have complex villains that don't just want to take over the world or, just kill everyone. Like, there can be some complexity and shades of gray there that you don't always get with movies. And that's why I love the TV format. I think it's incredible what we're able to do now with technology. And there's still so much room to grow because, yes, movies still, from a technical standpoint, oftentimes the CG or special effects is a lot better. in movies because the budgets are bigger and they can, maybe spend a little bit more time, where the stuff on TV is a little bit rushed, but it's getting better and better. And hopefully it keeps at that pace to where theoretically one day there will be no visual distinction. Maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't, but I think that when you look at Netflix specifically, what they've been doing with their original content, it's a lot. Maybe that's just my perspective. I don't know. You have to let me know if you agree with this or not. But they're producing these TV shows: House of Cards, Narcos, Orange is the New Black. Great TV shows, but they also produce their own original movies. I feel like the hype and the drive and the enthusiasm around the movies is very, very low compared to what they're able to do with TV shows. Maybe that's just my perception of it, but most of the Netflix original movies are good, but a lot of the Netflix original TV shows are great. And yes, there are some bad ones. I know you can certainly link to them. There are some bad original Netflix TV shows. However, there are some great ones, some of the best. And their movies are really good too, but there's just not that same level of enthusiasm around them, where there's people sharing on social media like, oh my gosh, can you believe this movie came out? It's so incredible, it's amazing. Maybe that'll happen one day, maybe they will start making really great movies, but I think the format is just so limited in what you're able to do. 2 hours is not a lot of time, so you've got to cram a bunch in or just tell a very basic, simple story. And that's not what I'm into. I want something longer. I want meteor. I want depth. I want characters and motivation and plot lines and all that stuff that you can do with TV that you just don't have time for with movies.